My name is Victoria Bennett, and at 19 years old, I find myself suffocating under the crushing weight of my family's cruel words. I can still vividly recall the day everything began to unravel, the moment I realized that I had somehow become a target in my own home. I was just 11 years old on that fateful day when I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, my heart racing as I examined the new marks that adorned my skin. Stretch marks. Livid stripes that told a story of growth and change, yet all my mother saw was a reason to unleash a storm of judgment. "Those will cost you love, you know," she said coldly, her eyes narrowing as she looked me over. "You will be ugly, unworthy." Her words pierced my heart like a dagger, as if each syllable was loaded with the pain of years of resentment and scorn. I remember staring at my reflection, tears brimming in my eyes, my small frame feeling more fragile than ever. The stretch marks were not just a physical change, they were my body's way of telling me I was growing, that I was alive. But she took that away from me, turned it into a weapon. Those words echoed in my mind endlessly, a cacophony of self-hatred that played like a broken record. Over the years, I learned that my value in this family had a price tag, one based almost entirely on how I looked. "You need to lose weight," my father would say during every family gathering, his gaze turning critical as it skimmed over my body, scrutinizing every curve that I possessed like a solider examining the enemy lines. "You are starting to look like your mother," one of my cousins would sneer, her voice dripping with malice, leaving a bitter taste on my tongue. "Shut up, you're just jealous," I would want to retort, but the words never seemed to form. Instead, I would just shrink in my chair, pulling my arms close around my body as if to shield myself from the barbs being thrown. Their cruelty knew no bounds, and even my 9-year-old cousin didn't hold back. "Your dog is going to die soon," she would say with a sickly sweet smile on her face, the words cutting deeper than anyone could ever imagine. I would force a laugh, trying to play it off, but the truth was, every taunt chipped away at me, causing me to slip further and further into a chasm of despair. The unbearable weight of those years was pressing down on my chest, turning each breath into a laborious effort. Therapy sessions were now on my horizon, an attempt to combat the spiraling depression that threatened to swallow me whole. But each time I found myself sitting across from my therapist, I felt as if I were trapped inside a glass box, unable to break free and expose the cracks in my family's dynamic. How do you describe the monster lurking behind closed doors when it could be your own blood? I swallowed my truths, too scared to share the horror of what my home had become. On those lonely nights, I hid behind a mask crafted from fear, perfecting the art of smiling as if everything was okay while my insides twisted in agony. The laughter that echoed through the hallways of my childhood home felt foreign, a sound that didn't belong to me. The echo of family gatherings weighed heavily on my heart, each guffaw reinforcing my belief that I would never be enough in their eyes. It was on one quiet night in my grandfather's house, the walls a silent witness to my turmoil, that I felt something shift deep within me. I was standing by the window, staring out at the stars twinkling against the inky dark sky. Loneliness wrapped around me like a shroud, but beneath that weight, a simmering rage began to bubble. My heart pounded as I thought about how the laughter had little to do with joy and everything to do with making me the punchline of their jokes. "Enough," I muttered under my breath, my voice barely above a whisper, but it felt like a declaration. I was tired, so tired of the taunts, the shame, and most critically, tired of being their punching bag. The thought of one more family dinner filled with jeering voices made bile rise in my throat. I could almost hear their sneers, feel their eyes appraising my every flaw. I closed my eyes, breathing in deeply, letting the air fill my lungs, and imagined myself breaking through the suffocating facade they had placed around me for all these years. "I will no longer be their target," I told myself, gripping the edge of the windowsill. I needed to gather courage, muster the strength to confront them. "Next time they laugh at my expense, I won't remain silent." My spirit, once shattered by their cruelty, began to mend at that moment. The storm inside me raged stronger, threatening to break free. I could see it all so clearly. The next family gathering loomed ahead, a season of holidays and celebrations where words would once again serve as daggers. I imagined myself walking into the room, head held high, a shield forged from the very pain they had inflicted upon me, a silent vow echoing in my mind. I would stand tall, unyielding against their tides of cruelty. I let the idea wash over me, a wave of empowerment that chased away the shadows. "Hey Vic, you are looking a little different," my cousin's taunt from the last gathering burst into my thoughts uninvited. I was reminded of their laughter. I had felt so small, my cheeks burning with humiliation while everyone roared at the joke. "I will show them," I whispered fiercely, feeling a surge of power rippling through my veins. The pain they inflicted would no longer define me. What if I turned the table instead? What if I became the one holding the power? I had endured enough humiliation over the years. I would not be silenced anymore. Tomorrow I would grieve the little girl who stood frozen before the mirror, terrified and unsure, but tonight I would unleash the hurricane that had been brewing far too long. I envisioned my mother's face as I challenged her words, feared the shifting glances from my father, and braced myself for the escalation of their insults. But more importantly, I envisioned my own reflection, stronger now, no longer cringing beneath their judgment. Slowly, I allowed myself to breathe, a steady rhythm, and the resolve inside me solidified like concrete. In the delicate stillness of the night, I felt the chains they had wrapped around my heart begin to snap. Each crack told a story, resonating with a fierce promise that I would no longer bear their contempt silently. Their laughter would not resonate alone. It would have an echo, a return of fire from me. The night dragged on, but I stood by the window, unwavering, waiting for my moment to unleash everything they had named me, the things that had birthed the rage deep inside. Anger and determination fused within me, promising that the narrative would shift. Time ticked by, but I didn't care. I was no longer merely a spectator of my own life. Soon the moment to confront them would arrive, and when it did, I would be ready. I would reclaim my voice, my worth, and my place at the table, not as a target, but as someone who had finally learned the power of standing up for myself. That night unfolded with an alarming usualness. My family wove around me in their chaotic symphony of laughter and laughter, every mocking jest punctuated by familiar insults. Dining room was decorated with bright, cheerful tablecloths and hanging paper lanterns, all remnants of a celebration that grandly belied the shadows lurking beneath the surface. The scent of roasted chicken and garlic wafted through the air, mingling with the sharpness of my unacknowledged anguish, churning in my stomach like an angry tide. As I sat there, a small island swallowed by a sea of their enthusiasm, I felt the atmosphere oppressive, a vice squeezing tighter around my chest until I could hardly breathe. Their banter surrounded me, a buzzing hive of irritation, the incessant chatter slashing through the walls I had built around my heart, barbed words poking through every vulnerable crevice. I searched for refuge in my beloved dog, curled up beside me, his fur warm and soft against my leg. His steady rhythmic breathing offered a form of comfort, a reminder that there existed a love untouched by the cruelty of my family. As laughter exploded again at an unflattering joke directed at me, each peal of mirth felt like a blow, carrying shards of pain that echoed through my memories. I could almost physically feel the weight of their eyes scrutinizing me across the room, the laughter transforming into a cacophony of judgment. They may have been joking, but the biting comments were razor-sharp, carving out pieces of me I was trying desperately to protect. My heart raced, a drumbeat echoing the urgency of my newfound resolve. I glanced over at my dog one more time, his gentle gaze meeting mine, and in that shared moment something flickered inside me, a fierce spark igniting like a match in the dark. His love surged through me, stirring the coals of my bravery, urging me to stand tall and confront the tidal wave of hurt that had been building within me. The gravitational pull of fear and self-doubt had kept me shackled too long, holding me down like a stone in a stream. But now their laughter felt like a gauntlet being thrown, a test of my very spirit. I could no longer remain invisible in the shadows of my family. I had to stand up and confront the lies that had ensnared me for far too long. With every ounce of trembling resolve, I rose from my seat, legs shaking as though the ground beneath me was threatening to vanish. The sounds of laughter faded into a distant whisper, and the room narrowed, the colors appearing more muted, more menacing. I felt the heat of their gazes boring into me, but along with it was an exhilarating rush. The space crackled with tension, the familiar sarcasm of my family dissolving into murmured confusion. With my heart pounding loud enough to drown out any lingering doubt, I turned to face them, those faces that had brought me untold pain. I could see the nuances of their expressions changing, the smugness that had once occupied their features flickering away like candlelight. Enough. I shouted, my voice trembling but fierce, echoing across the room, an explosion of energy that left even me startled. The word reverberated off the walls, a gunshot in a quiet field. Silence fell like a heavy blanket, suffocating the chaotic air as their laughter vanished, expressions of utter shock now painted across their faces. In that miraculous stillness, I had snapped the tether of submission, and with that spark of courage came an unstoppable flood of words. "You have no idea what your words have done to me," I declared, the tension electrifying my posture, my spine straightening as if each word bolstered my stance. My family exchanged glances, confusion swirling in their eyes but barely masking the embarrassment that began to creep in. "You think it is funny?" I asked incredulously. "Do you even realize how deeply your words have cut?" Shock-tinged guilt flickered across their faces, a flicker I knew would quickly be snuffed out, but I was determined to expose the raw truth. "Do you remember the times you called me ugly?" I pressed on, each word deliberate, each syllable a dagger aimed directly at their hearts. "The endless comments on my body, you turned my worth into a joke." The air was thick with disbelief, but I pushed forward, the memories flooding back, each mockery kindling the flame of my anger. They shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and as I glanced around the table, I could see the facade of their superiority cracking. "The way you laughed at my clothes," I raised my voice, echoing the bitterness that had swelled inside me for far too long. "You never wanted me to feel comfortable in my own skin. It was all a game to you, wasn't it?" I could feel the tremor in my hands, the rapid beating of my heart. Was I really doing this? The realization stood tall, fierce, and proud, overshadowing the uncertainty that had ruled my thoughts for years. I was finally taking control of my narrative, bridging the abyss that had long separated me from my family. I continued, "You never cared how many tears I shed over those comments." My words dripped with sincerity, raw and heartbreaking. "I told you what I felt, yet you laughed as if your words held no weight. Each insult was a layer stripped from my very soul, and I was left raw beneath it. The truth pulverized their responses, rendering them speechless. No witty retorts emerged from their lips. Instead, I stood at the center of their silence, pacing with the adrenaline of liberation. Do you see me as the butt of your jokes, or is this really all I am to you? I challenged, rallying the strength that had been gathered like storm clouds around us. I told them about the times I had been silenced, about how they had swept my pain under the rug, and their silent complicity only made it worse. There you sat, nodding along, pretending my sadness was insignificant. Don't you remember the nights I cried myself to sleep, wishing I could fit into the mold you created for me? My voice began to tremble, but I wouldn't allow it to quell my anger. I recounted the moments that had been tucked away, secrets tucked away into the depths of my soul like hidden treasures, but filled only with despair. You made me feel less than, and for years I believed it, but not anymore. The intensity of the room was palpable, each word striking like a match on flint. I relished that feeling, for once I was in control, a whirlwind of fierce emotions that had long been ignored. My heart still raced, yet it beat with fierce determination rather than fear. They were trapped under the weight of everything I had unleashed, and in that moment I knew I had their attention, their first taste of the repercussions of their actions. Their expressions shifted from disbelief to something darker, the buttery colors of their previous laughter extinguished as shame washed over them. I could see it clearly, the flicker of unease dawning in their eyes, and I knew I had struck a nerve, manifesting that awkward silence that felt as heavy as a blanket made of stone. For years I was invisible to you, I continued forcefully, locking eyes with each one of them, but tonight I stand here unbroken, ready to reclaim myself. One of them, the bravest of the lot, finally broke the silence, her words a tiny whisper of disbelief. Are you really saying this to us? Her voice trembled on the edges, confusion cascading through her certainty. You have to understand, we were only joking. Joking, I interrupted, incredulity spilling from my lips. For you, it was all a joke, but the scars remain real. Your laughter is what gave birth to my insecurities, your words carved into my being like lines in a starved tree. You think your harmless jokes didn't leave a mark, that I didn't replay them in my head every single day. I pressed, reigniting the fire within me. I took a deep breath, grounding myself, forcing calmness through my body while I glanced at my dog. His thoughtful gaze inspired me, lending further strength to my resolve. I could not afford to waver now. You've turned my worth into a joke when it should have been my story. I spoke passionately, conviction lacing my voice. I am tired of being the punchline. I watched as the conversation began to unravel, my family members struggling to piece together a response that wouldn't maintain the illusion of their previous superiority. Desperation clouded their minds. They could not reclaim the control I had wrested from them. Their grip on me had begun to dissolve, and with it they faced the terrifying reality of their actions. Finally, the tension broke, fizzing into a discussion among themselves, and as they whispered, stirring defensive retorts like a boiling pot on the edge of overflow, I could see their thoughts colliding in a storm of disarray. What are you talking about? One shouted, stunned disbelief coloring their tone. You're being dramatic. I exclaimed, my heart racing at their audacity, but the thrill coursed through my veins. You've belittled me for years, and now a simple confrontation is considered drama. How is it fair for me to suffer while you cast me in shadows? Their mutterings fell silent as I continued. Until tonight, I was merely a character in your twisted play, a performer who had lost her narrative. And so we stood, clashing in an invisible battlefield, and I could both feel my heart pounding and the fluttering of freedom swelling within me. Their faces were etched with disbelief, looking back at me as if I had morphed into someone they did not recognize, someone strong and unapologetic. In this moment, everything shifted. I had freed myself from their perception, laying bare age-old wounds while carving out my own identity rooted firmly in truth. The room was electric with tension, and I relished that feeling. For once I was in control. I felt powerful, standing tall amidst the ruins of years spent feeling inferior. They were caught off guard, struggling to find words as shame enveloped them like a heavy, suffocating shroud. Their silence was liberating to me, watching their faces, once haughty now faltering, as they finally faced the truest consequences of their actions. Stand tall, I told myself, as the tempest within me roared. With every fiber of my being, I prepared myself to confront the very essence of their cruelty, the bittersweet memories of laughter that had echoed through my childhood, laughter that had only served to punctuate my worthlessness. I took a deep breath, the air thick with anticipation and the faint scent of cold metal around me, and began to illustrate the pain they had never acknowledged. You think it was just teasing, just harmless fun. I directed my voice toward them, but it felt as if I was speaking to the walls, the very walls that had witnessed my misery. Your laughter shattered my self-esteem, and it fostered an overwhelming depression that clung to me like a shadow. A murmur went through them like a dark wave, faces shifting uncomfortably in the dim lighting of the room. Shadows flickered on their cheeks, my voice enveloping them in a chill they could not ignore. It was my turn to shine a spotlight on the hurt they had so easily inflicted. For so many nights I have lain awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, hoping the words you threw at me would fade away. But they never did. They echoed endlessly in my mind, an oppressive symphony of ridicule. I could feel my pulse quickening, a racehorse that had just seen the finish line. Each confession released years of pent-up agony, lifting the heavy weight of shame from my shoulders like a shroud. I decided to stare directly at the eyes that had once looked through me, indifferent and cruel as if they were a window to my sorrows. And do you want to hear about how I struggled to even wear clothes that fit? The oversized clothing became my armor, my shell. I thought I could hide from you, from all those hurtful eyes. But I was just running from myself, perpetually trapped in the chaos of my mind. I took a brief moment to look down at my own reflection in the polished surface of the table, the messenger of my pain standing tall and unafraid. Then I revealed the truth I had held close for too long. You think I forgot about that day, the day when my cousin's father crossed lines that should never have been crossed, when he shattered my sense of safety? My voice rose, each word more poignant than the last, and anger surged through me like a wildfire. Did you think I would just forget your dismissals, your insistence that I was imagining things? Your denial has crushed me beneath the weight of your ignorance for years. Gasps rippled through the room, the color draining from their faces. Disbelief and horror knitted their brows together as they grasped the true dimensions of my story. I can see it in your eyes, I said, finding strength in their unease. You thought you could silence me, but here I am, here we are. You no longer have the luxury of avoiding the truth. You must face your demons, I cried, an urgency in my voice that shivered the air between us. The words rolled off my tongue like molten steel, burning a path of liberation as I revealed layer after layer of hurt. My heart raced faster with each word, every revelation. I was pouring my soul into the open, and the emptiness that had once filled me felt strangely beautiful. I had risen from their ashes, fierce and unapologetic. I could see the whispers begin to shuffle among them like dry leaves in a gust of wind. I pressed on, my voice unyielding, soaring above the sound of their shame. Can you even comprehend the magnitude of your hurtful words, the gravity of your ignorance? I want you to truly absorb it, not to carry it lightly but to feel the weight as I have. You have inflicted torment upon me, but now I stand here, liberated from the chains you had forged in your laughter. I took a moment to invest more in my surroundings. The decor that once seemed so charming now served as a backdrop for my theater of catharsis. The walls were draped in family photos, memories frozen in time, stark reminders of moments that had left me battered yet stronger. I scanned the room, watching their eyes dart amongst themselves, seeking refuge from the steady torrent of my truths. I almost chuckled out loud at how satisfying their discomfort felt, filling me with a rush of empowerment I had been denied for too long. You are not exempt from the pain you have caused, I boomed, now addressing the very air thick with their guilt. You will not dismiss this as another chapter in your life. This is my story, the burden I have carried alone, the truth that will not be silenced. I want you to feel every moment of my struggle. I want you to feel as tormented as I was. I could see confusion overtaking their shock, a kaleidoscope of emotions reflecting from their expressions. They were tangled, caught by the revelations that burst forth like confetti, colorful, chaotic, and still painfully sharp. Each moment felt like slow motion, each second stretched until it felt eternal under the suffocating tension. I observed one face in particular, the one that had always been the ringleader of my suffering. Her eyes were wide, glossed over with something akin to regret. Did she finally understand? Did she feel the regret that had yet to fully form in my own heart? How could you laugh when you knew? I pressed, the air thickening around my words. You didn't think I could hear your jokes, your mockery. You thought I was too weak to notice the way your smiles turned to sneers whenever I entered the room. I took a step closer, my resolve firm. But I know now that I am far from weak. I am strong, and I will not let your shadows linger over me any longer. Victoria, we had no idea, someone finally muttered, a voice that fell flat in the room like a petal off a flower. But I had no interest in being consoled by a hollow apology. The tears they shed for me over the years were far too late. I smiled at them, a bitter twist of lips. But that's just it, isn't it? You didn't want to know, you chose not to see. You twisted my silence into your false sense of security, thinking I was okay. You thought I would just fade away quietly into the background. I felt the wave of emotion welling up inside me, and the flames of vengeance and liberation ignited within. I dealt my truths out like cards, one after the other, revealing the full hand of my pain, my battles, my survival. You wanted me to be invisible, to disappear into the oversized fabric wrapped around me. But I survived. I learned to exist in that relentless darkness, in the silence that felt so familiar yet unbearable. I paused, taking a breath as I swam in the waves of my thoughts, feeling so alive in this moment. But visibility is a strength, isn't it? You invited me to be silent, but in claiming my voice I have wrested the power back. I'm done tiptoeing around your insensitivity, I continued, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling within. I would not back down, this was my moment. Are you ready to embrace what you have done? Because I am ready to embrace the truth of my life. With every word that spilled from my heart, I felt lighter, the chains of my past slowly unshackling me from a life I had once believed was defined by their judgments. I wanted to scream out this liberation, to shout at the peaks of mountains, to let the valleys echo back my fierce assertion of being. The color had drained from their faces, but in that moment of silence I realized their fear didn't dampen my spirit, it fueled it. There is no more hiding, I said, my hand clenched into a fist. I will not disappear. I will become the force you never saw coming. I will turn my pain into resilience and my scars into badges of survival. It was beautiful and terrifying, but I stood resolute, ready for their reactions, ready to embrace whatever chaos would ensue. In unveiling the darkness they had cast over me, I felt the spark of empowerment ignite. For the first time in years, I could speak my truth and they would bear witness in that moment. Standing there among my family, I felt a profound shift deep within me. It was as if a dormant volcano had finally awoken, ready to unleash its truths, its ash covering everything in a thick layer of undeniable reality. The air around me simmered with an energy that crackled and sparked. I could see my family, my parents, my cousins, those who bore witness to so many unaddressed grievances, shift in place, each squirming like fish caught flapping in sunlight, their faces flushed with the red hue of shame flushing their cheeks. That very shame felt almost palpable. It hovered like a thick fog, obscuring their ability to escape my piercing words. "You should feel ashamed," I stated, my voice steady and unwavering. No longer was I the silent participant in their chaotic family tapestry. Now, here in this charged environment, I had taken center stage. I reveled in the freshness of my honesty as their eyes widened, disbelief wrinkling their brows. I watched as they pieced together the weight of my suffering, the dark scars inflicted by careless remarks and dismissive behaviors. Memories flooded back to me, sharp and vivid, moments when my worth had been measured against expectations I could never meet, times when I felt like a phantom in my own life. Every critical comment, every moment you overlooked me left me wondering whether I existed at all, I declared, my tone as sharp and unforgiving as the edge of a knife. The words spilled out of me in great rushes, a torrential downpour that had been dammed for too long. I could feel the tension in the room build, much like the anticipation before a summer storm, and I embraced it wholeheartedly. Each truth I unveiled felt like a release, an unshackling of the chains that had kept me bound in silence. I could see recognition dawning in their faces, a realization that clawed at their insides with a mixture of guilt and discomfort. My mother's hands trembled slightly as they lay on her knees, her knuckles white with the pressure of her grip. "Victoria, please, we didn't know," she started, but I cut her off, my resolve hardening with every word I spoke. "That is exactly the problem, isn't it? You didn't know because you chose not to see." I could see my cousins exchanging glances, their eyes wide, filled with unspoken questions. Had they ignored my plight all these years too? Their uncertainty fed my strength, and I pressed on, wrapping my truth around me like a cozy cloak on a winter's night. The more I spoke, the more emboldened I felt, releasing the power I had hidden for so long. "Do you remember that time at the family reunion when I asked to join the game? You laughed. You all laughed." I glanced around the room, a smirk tugging at the corners of my mouth as their expressions twisted into forms of regret and disbelief. "You made me feel like an intruder in my own family." I stood taller, my heart racing with exhilaration, passion coursing through every vein as if I were finally alive. I could feel the slow burn of liberation wash over me, and in that new freedom I discovered a power that I never knew existed. My truth had become a hammer, and I prepared to shatter every thick wall they had erected around their own egos. "You should be ashamed of the way you dismissed my struggles," I continued, my voice ringing out in that charged atmosphere. "The way you never stopped to think about the impact your words had on me. I was not just a girl trying to fit into your mold, but a person who needed you, who craved your understanding." I leaned forward slightly, my eyes glinting with challenge. "You see me now, don't you?" I asked, and I could tell they were grappling with the realization that the invisible weight of my truth had become heavier than any societal obligation to silence me. I sensed the truth I was serving slithering through the air, wrapping around their throats. As they swallowed hard, I soaked up their discomfort, stroking my own emerging power like a young flame flickering in the dark. It was enough to make me feel alive, truly alive, in a way that I hadn't felt in years. I had stepped from the shadows, and now I basked in the light of my own strength, and just like that, the room erupted into fleeting murmurs, confused exchanges interspersed with disbelief. "Victoria, we never meant," one of my aunts began, but with a raised hand I halted her words. "It doesn't matter if you didn't mean to hurt me, intentions don't erase the pain." My voice was steady, filled with unwavering resolve. I was hurt nonetheless. I was pushed aside like a forgotten toy, left to collect dust in the corner. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" I spat the words out, the emotional pressure saturating the air. "You bundled me away while you wove your own perfect family picture, but all I saw was a blurry version of myself staring back from that frame. Funny, isn't it? I was the ghost haunting my own life, and now here I stand, no longer unseen, no longer silenced." Gasps echoed softly, and I could see the weight of realization crashing down upon them. Each adult's face contorting in regret, some squirming in their chairs as if the very fabric of the room were closing in around them. My father, usually the stoic figure of authority, suddenly appeared fragile, his brow furrowed in contemplation. Neurotic patterns of sweat glistened along his hairline as he wrestled with emotions surfacing, emotions undoubtedly suppressed due to pride. "You want to have a voice now?" he questioned haltingly, glancing at the others for support, but I saw their eyes glued to me in awe. I took a breath, feeling the surge of my reawakened spirit. "I have always wanted a voice," I said firmly, "but you chose to ignore it. You chose to ignore me." The truth of it shook like a drumbeat in the air, and I felt exhilarated. I was no longer a figment of their memories. I was tangible, solid, real. "Victoria, can't you see we love you?" My mother's voice trembled, and for the first time I caught a glimpse of vulnerability in her fierce gaze. I smiled lightly, not letting her wall of superb bravado deceive me anymore. Love had become nothing more than a hollow word if it had not been accompanied by understanding. Love is action, love is empathy. Love is knowing the people in front of you and acknowledging their struggles. I could see my words settling like stones, plummeting deep into the river of our family ties, sending ripples through the water, making waves of discomfort. Stop hiding behind this facade of pretended perfection. It has done nothing for any of us but breed discontent. And then came a tangible silence, thick and heavy, wrapping around us like a winter fog while I took a moment to absorb their reactions, watching their expressions morph as the reality settled in. I also want you to know I forgive you, I said, the notion surprising even me as it slipped from my lips. But forgiveness does not equal acceptance of past harm, nor does it imply my pain is forgot. It means I will use this experience to elevate myself as I finally deserve to be. I watched as those words danced in the space between us. My heart swelled with a sense of triumph when I heard their acknowledgments. A mingled storm of emotions flickered across their faces, shock, regret, and for some even understanding. They were forced to confront their own shortcomings, their own negligence, their own blind spots, and I could see shining through their eyes the beginnings of growth. Their attempts to retain control slipped away with each word that escaped their lips. I had no idea it was this bad, Vicky, one cousin finally admitted, breaking the silence. You were so strong, always pushing through like a champion. We didn't realize. Exactly, I replied, emboldened by the honesty weaving through us. Strength does not mean invisibility. It just means that sometimes those who seem strongest need the most care. In that room of thunderous silence, I began to feel a different kind of power coursing through me. I had exposed what lay beneath the polished surface of our family relationship, a river of unacknowledged hurt that had pooled between us, and I no longer feared its depths. As I spoke, the energy slowly shifted. It wasn't a cacophony of anger I craved, but rather a reconciliation of sorts born from the rawness of this moment. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my liberation wash over me like ocean waves lapping at the shore, cleansing me of past wounds and gifting me strength. I opened my eyes once more, the room still murky with uncertainty yet rich with new vibrations. I had captivated them with my truth, and in this moment my voice had morphed into a shield. You can take this point forward and together we can heal, but it will take work, time, and sincerity. No more silence. I stepped back slightly, the words reverberating in the air long after I had spoken. The murmurs of apprehension around the room died down, replaced by earnest expressions of contemplation. The air felt lighter, less charged with pent-up guilt now that I had finally voiced my feelings and in turn allowed them to confront their shadows. With this liberation came clarity. They could no longer act as if I was a mere footnote in their lives. I was a full-bodied narrative, and now they all had to reckon with that. As I gathered my thoughts, I felt the rush of new life blooming inside me, and the giddy rush of independence rushed like ivy over stone walls, reclaiming space as it thrived. I stood there, whole and liberated amidst a sea of family members awakening to the realities I had laid bare before them. This was my victory, not over them, but for myself. A journey towards healing that began with lifting the cloak off the silence I had cloaked myself in for far too long. I stepped away, knowing that I had rewritten the course of my existence, and what remained to be seen was how they would choose to respond. Each sought my gaze, eyes laden with unsaid apologies transformed with the promise of change. I was free, and that truth tasted oaky and crisp, expanding my spirit as I moved into a future that was mine rightfully so. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that.